This is 20 Minutes of Impact from the United States Energy Association Power Sector Podcast. I'm Herman K. Trabish. I've covered the power sector since 2006, and I currently report for Utility Dive. My guest is David Wade, President and CEO of the Electric Power Board, or EPB, of Chattanooga, Tennessee, one of the most innovative of U.S. municipal utilities. David's going to describe why EPB is working on quantum computing with Oak Ridge National Laboratory, NVIDIA, and IonQ, further the possibilities of using it in the power sector to optimize electricity delivery. David's over 4-decade career with Chattanooga's Electric Power Board began as a line helper, and he worked his way up through hands-on construction and executive leadership experiences until he became president and CEO in 2016, and he's now CEO of an enlarged organization. Under his leadership, EPB developed what many consider the U.S.'s most automated electric utility distribution system. So, David, to begin with, you got to explain, at least with a high-level overview, what quantum computing is for EPB, how it fits into the energy sector and utility operations. And before you start that answer, David, let me just warn our listeners. If any of you listening don't fully understand quantum computing, don't worry. Even quantum physicists don't fully understand things like superposition and entanglement. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, well, thank you. Certainly, the quantum technology is an exciting technology in itself, not just the computing, but the networking and sensing that go along. And they will have tremendous impact on the energy space. In fact, we first were introduced to quantum networking back in 2017 with the Department of Energy leveraging quantum technology for cybersecurity on the electric grid. So our introduction actually came in the networking side, and now we're moving into the computing side. And I think rather than talk about the technology is just to think about it as a paradigm shifting technology, something that enables us to do processing that we couldn't do yesterday, whether it's with the networks or with the computing at a different speed, at a different energy source, and just to totally make things possible that really were not possible in the past. That next generation between mainframes to networks to PCs to supercomputing and now quantum computing. It's just a paradigm shift, I would say.
Interesting. And it promises much faster speeds and much higher volumes of work, doesn't it?
It totally creates the ability to do things that are not even feasible today, and I like to tell folks one of the examples I like to think about is our GPSs in our cars and going to Google Maps and asking it to give direction that at times it will create a traffic jam itself because it doesn't forecast where cars are going to be because it doesn't have the technology to do that. It decides once it's there, it's traffic, it reroutes you. But if it had the ability and the computing power to forecast based on everybody that's traveling and all the folks that were answering, can you imagine what a difference that would make?
Right, right. And that's from what I've read, and uh, that's what these these physics qualities represent in the power sector is this idea of superposition, this idea of entanglement, is that it can do more than one thing at a time. So it can find what's now and what's going to happen and then figure out the best way to get from now to what's going to happen. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. David, I want to ask you about the EPB Quantum Center. That's what EPB is doing in conjunction with its partners. I've read that it's currently running state-of-the-art supercomputing, but it's running it with early-stage commercial quantum platforms. So what power sector applications are you running right now with all that compute power? What are you
Well,
doing with it?
well, right now we're just in starting to develop the algorithms, and we're starting to really develop how to optimize really our electric grid. We're starting with looking at our distribution operations and where normally open points would fall and how that affects the efficiency of the system. We're starting with a small problem, looking at a handful of 35 circuits, and saying, if we move to all these different permutations, how does that affect losses? How does it affect voltage? How does it affect the ultimate expense of operating a distribution system? Longer term, we'll add more into the generation and the stuff side. So initially, we're spending some time building the algorithms, understanding what part of the algorithms are more suited for quantum computing and what parts are more suited for high performance computing.
Um, I wonder if I could get you to be a little bit more specific. You're looking at 35 circuits. You're looking at I think you said something about them being open or not. What kind of from a practical sense, like for people that know what goes on in an electrical system, electric power system, are you looking at what happens if you're using variable energy, or what happens if you're using customer-owned energy? What happens if too many EVs plug in? These are problems that are being dealt with regular computing right now. But I wonder, could you be a little more specific than that?
Yeah, I think this first project, our electric system in itself is a little bit different than a lot of electric systems. Is we have very few radial circuits. Most of our circuits have loop feeds. And so
Hmm.
we are, and have a normally open point between those circuits where we can automatically switch between those.
Hmm.
For this first stage, what we're really looking at is what's the ideal location for those and how does it change based on different system characteristics. And some of those may be it's the middle of the day and there's a lot of solar generation that's going on because the sun's out. Some may be that, it's early morning, the sun's not out, and we have a lot of need for heating going on. So we're looking at how should we move our open points, even something as simple as moving open points, which is relatively simple. And how does it affect the efficiency of the system as a whole and the quality of power you delivery by simply deciding this should be attached to this substation and this load attached to another substation?
Interesting. Okay. So it's really the challenge of running a modern grid. Now, I want to move from there to the future, because that's what this is really about. I want to look ahead. When you see the potential of quantum computing, uh, what advanced sort of optimizations and at what speeds? Um, what are the targets at the Quantum Center for the NVIDIA chips, the IonQ quantum computer, and all the brain power that Oak Ridge is bringing to this? What is it like flipping a switch and you don't have to look at the power system anymore? You let the computer do it, or what can quantum computing do in the future when this is all perfected?
Oh, I think it will be incredible what happens, even when you start thinking about the proliferation of distributed devices all across the energy system. We've really built an energy system based on having a lot of large scale generation, transmission, and then distribution. But now we're in a transition where we're still keeping the large scale generation, but we're having to incorporate literally hundreds of thousands or more millions of devices across the country that are storing and generating and using energy at variable times, some controllable, some not controllable. And so when you think about really orchestrating and optimizing that system, that is when you have the nirvana, I guess, of optimization, right? Is when you really truly can take and integrate all of these distributed assets, not in a way today, oftentimes they're integrated to look like a big asset. They batch a bunch of them together and they're dispatched so they look similar to a large asset. But if we can look at everything from at a individual perspective and we can orchestrate it, I think you can play some really good music at that point in time.
I've heard this idea of orchestration from a lot of providers of um, virtual power plants and distributed energy, aggregated distributed energy resources. So I'm familiar with it. Let me, before I ask the question that I want to ask, let me ask a little bit about EPB. How many customers do you have on your system? How much rooftop solar? How many EVs? I mean, I know you probably don't have the numbers right at your fingertips, but broadly speaking, and and what does that uh, represent in terms of what might be in 10 years or something?
Yeah, we have a roughly 200,000 customers on our distribution system. We're part of the Tennessee Valley area, so we're kind of working closely with TVA, and we think the quantum space will not only affect us, it will affect TVA and the other
Yeah,
local power companies as well. Uh, in Tennessee, we're not a heavy penetration of solar. Uh, we're starting to see certainly more EVs. We're seeing more in our parking garage every day. I don't have an exact number. It's probably just the single digits, the low single digits still here in our area, but it is growing. What's growing probably more than that is we have started to really grow the our ability to add storage in our network as a distributed resource. So we now have, I would say right now, against our all-time peak, we're probably at about 4% of our all 4 or 5% of our all-time peak. This year we'll add another 4 or 5%, so we'll be close to 10% of our all-time peak by the end of this year. And next year we have plans to add more to that. So we'll probably in a couple of years, even just a corporate, we'll have storage equivalent to about 15% of our all-time peak, which is a pretty dense amount of storage in itself.
fast growth, which means that it has a lot of value and market appeal when it grows that fast, I think.
Yeah,
Is that
I think the storage coming on, and then how do you orchestrate when you store energy and when you dispatch energy, and is doing a fantastic job. It also is a great resiliency play. We had an area yesterday that would have been out power, but it stayed on because we had batteries in that area keeping the customers within power. So it's great to orchestrate it for optimization and efficiency, but it also becomes a never level of resiliency as well when we orchestrate this stuff the right way.
If you want to hear the big last exchange of this terrific conversation, support the podcast by subscribing at just $2.99 per month to the Power Sector Podcast's Power More. With your subscription, you'll get both parts of the content delivered directly to you the second they drop.